bring in the president's counselor, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, George. Hi.
So I just talked about the economy right there. You've seen another good jobs report on Friday, solid growth through this year. The stock market, as the president has pointed out, at record highs, yet the poll this week showed 61% disapproval for the president. So why are people so unhappy with the president when the economy is doing so well?
But the numbers that you talked about are the most important indicators. You also see consumer confidence numbers, manufacturer, home builders, small business formation confidence. You see record close of the Dow over 22,000 points. These are the measurements that matter to everyday Americans. And even this president, when he came in, George, he made a promise that for every new regulation in, he would have 2 that went out. We're closer to 16 out for every new one in. And that regulatory framework has been so critically important to taxpayers, to property owners, to folks who are working hard and trying to get ahead. I would note, too, in some of the polling, which, of course, I scour daily on behalf of the president, his approval rating among Republicans and conservative and Trump voters is down slightly. It needs to go up. They are telling him, just enact your program. Don't worry about a Congress that isn't supporting legislation to get big ticket items done. And don't worry about all the distractions and diversions and discouragement that others who are still trying to throw logs in your path are throwing your way. Focus on the agenda. And he's doing that. And look, nobody can deny these economic numbers. I mean, the idea that it's not getting huge coverage, it's been a great weekend for this president. You see 2.6% growth. It doubled the first quarter growth. And you see the job creation, 209,000 exceeded expectations, his 1 millionth job created. And then you also just yesterday saw a unanimous rebuke of North Korea, the greatest economic sanctions package ever levered against them. It cost them about $1 billion. Even allies in the region like China, Japan, South Korea, all agreeing with the United States that North Korea and its nuclear capabilities must be stopped.
We have seen that united front against North Korea right now, and the job growth and economic growth has been pretty steady with what we saw at the end of President Obama. But one of the distractions, that New York Times story this morning talking about all these Republicans jockeying now to already run in 2020. The Times cites interviews with 75 Republicans at every level of the party. They say they expressed widespread uncertainty about whether President Trump will run in 2020. Are you convinced he wants to run again? And what do you make of the story?
The president says privately and publicly often, George, that he'll be there for 7.5 more years. So he plans on being a 2-term president. I read that article, and I want to say a few things about it. First of all, I think that in the Republican Party for many decades, we've suffered from what I call staph infection. People who are rewarded for losses. Most of the people quoted, most of the people involved, I'm sure, have never won a national political campaign like the one I was involved in or you were involved in years ago. Number 2, they need a full employment act in Republican consultancy. Some of them are still not supporting their party and their party's main points of view on tax reform and health reform, on putting ISIS in retreat, if not full defeat. And I want to make a remark about Vice President Pence. I've worked with him for 10 years as his pollster, as a senior advisor, and certainly work with him daily in the White House. It is absolutely true that the vice president is getting ready for 2020 for re-election as vice president.
So no concern he's setting up a shadow campaign?
And he's also getting ready for 2018. Zero concern. That is complete fiction. That is complete fabrication. And I know that his advisors who had comments attributed to them have pushed back very strongly, as has the vice president, and as am I right now unequivocally. Vice President Pence is a very loyal, very dutiful, but also incredibly effective vice president, an active vice president with this president. He is a peer to the president in the West Wing. He just came off a trip in Eastern Europe, and he'll go back, I believe, within the next week to South America to represent the country on his 4th or 5th foreign trip since taking office. But let me just make very clear. People need Republican consultants. There's always people trying to play the parlor game. They're not on the. They're not in the, I'd say, Trump inside inner circle because they did not believe in him. They totally missed what was happening in America, that the forgotten man and forgotten woman, many of whom had voted for Democrats in the past, many of whom who had never voted or never voted in decades, came forth and made this new Trump coalition in a way that, Frank, respectfully, the last couple of Republican candidates did not. Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan won one state. They lost Wisconsin by 7 points. Donald Trump won Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Iowa. I would tell my Republican brethren, get on board. Help us with tax reform and health reform and stop looking at 2020.
Let's see. We will see what happens with that in September. Meantime, General Kelly wrapping up his first week as Chief of Staff. We have that picture of him addressing the entire White House staff right there. Some 200 people lined up there. I guess that's in the old executive office building. What difference has he made so far?
It was quite a week with General Kelly. A few things, George. I know there's much commentary about the order and the discipline. All of that's true. But let me just tell you that General Kelly is someone who wants to empower his staff to succeed. He commands respect, but he also shows respect. And in sitting in different meetings with him and watching him in action this week, I've been incredibly impressed as to what a great listener, fully engaged General Kelly is. And I also believe the world is such a dangerous place, and so much of President Trump's day is filled with intelligence briefings and new facts and figures about this increasingly dangerous world. It really helps to have a general in his 5th decade of public service going right back in and taking that oath of office again for a new position, so that he is hand in glove with the president. He has been with the president quite a bit this week, but he's been with the rest of us and the senior staff as well. We're very happy to have General Kelly there as well, because he, for the first 6 months of this year, George, has been a member of this president's cabinet. And he knows full well this hand-picked cabinet of talented and engaged and quite successful men and women are superstars in this administration. And also, General Kelly, I want to say, has been the chief military aide for 2 different secretaries of defense in a very bipartisan fashion. In addition, we should mention the biographical point, in addition to running the Southern Command. So he's very knowledgeable about the hot spots around the world. He, of course, is a master at unit cohesion, and we feel that coming together in the West Wing.
We still are seeing tweets from the president. He's insisted he's going to keep up that tradition, including this one on Thursday, where he said, "Our relationship with Russia is at an all-time and very dangerous low. You can thank Congress, the same people that can't even give us health care." How is Congress responsible for relations with Russia being at an all-time low, and who is he talking about?
That tweet was likely in reference to the sanctions package that the president signed, because it's a good step forward, but that he's also been critical. And also, look, if you're Russia, you can't be happy with President Trump. We're now exporting coal to Eastern
Kellyanne,
Europe.
wait a second. The president
He's beefing up the military.
Let me just stop you right there, because the president signed that legislation. There's been widespread pushback from members of Congress, including Republicans like Senator John McCain and others, who say Russia is responsible. Russia, with its actions in Ukraine, Russia, its actions with interfering in our election, Russia's the one responsible for relations being at an all-time low, but the president blames Congress.
No, well, he doesn't blame Congress exclusively. I'm talking about the sanctions package. But Russia overall, this president's been very tough on Russia when it comes to, again, dipping into their energy capabilities in the region. We're now exporting coal to Eastern Europe, beefing up the military, putting that money and that manpower and presidential imprimatur behind an emboldened and a better financed military. And also, look at what the decisive, swift, and I would say internationally acclaimed action President Trump took in April when Assad was gassing his own people, including those babies we all saw, gasping and taking their last breaths of air. The president very swiftly, I think, against what Russia wanted done, frankly, took action in Syria. So he met with President Putin for over 2 hours face-to-face. We know that if we can work on the big issues with Russia, like defeating ISIS and not calling them our determined enemies like Hillary Clinton did a year ago, and not putting them in full retreat or defeat, calling them the JV team that was losing power, as President Obama did, then we'll work on those issues. We're very happy that Russia was one of the 15 members unanimously voted for sanctions yesterday on North Korea. You have 5 permanent members and 10 rotating members.
Kellyanne, that's very different from the message the president is sending in that tweet. You also have bipartisan members of Congress right now, including coming up on this program, Tom Tillis and Chris Coons, who now are introducing legislation to protect the special counsel, Robert Mueller, saying that any decision by the president to fire Mueller, if it indeed comes, should be reviewed by a judge. What does the president think of that legislation?
Why are we engaging in hypotheticals? The entire Russia investigation is a hypothetical. The president has called it a fiction, a total fabrication to excuse the colossal and unexpected unwanted defeat of Hillary Clinton in last year's election. People just can't get over that election, George. It's corrosive to our body politic. The president is going to continue to talk about America, and I suppose others, sadly, will continue to talk about Russia. But Ty Cobb, the special counsel to the president in the White House, has made very clear as recently as this week that the president and others around him will continue to comply and cooperate and provide any information they have. But he also was not made aware of the grand jury proceedings until we all were. These are supposed to be done in secret, and yet that leaked out, as so many things do that are harmful to our security interest. And let me just say something else about Russia. The president took on a new tack in West Virginia, speaking about this the other night. He told the people there and around the country that those who are pushing this phony, fabricated Russian investigation are cheating you, the voters, out of what you clearly said you want. You want a new and different direction. You don't want the same failed policies. You want free markets. You want democracy. You want national security, American exceptionalism, prosperity at home. He's making good on those promises. Look at the stock market. Look at the jobs numbers. Look at the growth. Look at the regulatory rollback on things that were hurting taxpayers and property owners and job creators. And look at what he has promised those people. They voted for him. And if Bob Mueller is going to continue the investigation, we'll cooperate however best we can. But the president is not a target of any investigation.
Well,
Jim Comey told him that as FBI director 3 times, and he assured that under oath.
That may have been overtaken by events now, and we'll see whether the special counsel is indeed looking at obstruction, including of the president.
Doubtful.
Part of the reason, as you know, that this story has persisted is because the White House and the president's surrogates have told conflicting stories. First, they said no contacts with Russia, and then it turned out there were at least 18 contacts. The story broke in the New York Times saying the president was involved in the drafting of his son Don Jr.'s misleading response to that meeting he had with Russians during the campaign. And Jay Sekulow, the president's attorney, came on GMA and told me this, saying the president was not involved.
The president didn't sign off on anything. The president wasn't involved in that.
Well, the New York Times says that he was involved in it, that several people on the plane were involved in it as well. So you're disputing
That's incorrect.
that account from the New York Times.
Yes.
But just this week, when the Washington Post reported with more detail that the president was indeed involved in the drafting, Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, conceded it. Let's listen.
The president weighed in as any father would based on the limited information that he had. This is all discussion, frankly, of no consequence.
2 very different answers in the space of 2 weeks there, Kellyanne.
The most important thing that Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said there, which is completely true, is that there's no consequence to any of these meetings. The president weighed in as a father. He did not dictate the statement.
But first, the White House and the president's lawyers said he wasn't involved at all. They didn't tell the truth.
George, you know, I know there's this whole thing about where everybody wants to take
about
this tack.
telling the truth.
You know, let's talk about let's talk about telling the truth. Let's talk about a president looking Americans in the eye who are still suffering 8 years later, who were lied to. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Benghazi happened because of a video. Go tell the families of those 4 innocent
Kellyanne,
Americans
you're simply
who were
changing the subject right here.
that lie mattered.
Hold on a second.
No, that is the subject. Let's talk about credibility that
President
impacts
Obama
people.
and Hillary Clinton. Right there, I said
Those were big lies.
directly different responses within 2 weeks. How do you explain that? Can the president and his team get control of that and be open and truthful about the Russia investigation?
George, the president has said the entire investigation is fabricated, that this is a conclusion in search of evidence. They've come up with nothing. We've been doing this for almost about a year now. And what is there to show for it? What has actually metastasized in a way that we can say, wow, there's a smoking gun, there's a silver bullet? I spent a lot of time with you during the campaign as a campaign manager on your 2 programs, and others did with ABC as well. What one thing did we ever say, do, or conspire that had anything to do with Russia? When I needed negative information about Hillary Clinton, I took a moment and I listened to Hillary Clinton. I mean, we went to Michigan,
Kellyanne,
not
but wait
Moscow.
a second. We know
we
right now, we know now what has come up in just the last few weeks is that Don Jr. responded to an email saying that he was going to get Russian government information on Hillary Clinton. That was not out during the campaign. That was revealed just in the last several weeks.
Right, but what came of that meeting? Nothing. Jared Kushner shared with the House and Senate committees and then with all of us in a public statement at the White House about 10 days ago, George, that he had texted an aide and said, please get me out of this meeting. It's a waste of time. If you're getting dirt on your political opponent, if you're getting the silver bullet and the secret sauce on how to win the election, you don't ask your aide to pull you out of the meeting. You say, please order lunch. Let's just stay a while. There's nothing. It was nonsense. It was a ridiculous meeting. It was nothing. People want to offer their services and have meetings all of the time, believe me. I know you know this. But let's look at the consequence. No follow-up, no results,
line,
no
Kellyanne.
relatability. I was never informed of that meeting. I found out about it when you found out about it, when the rest of the public did. When the president had no knowledge of that meeting.
Bottom line, Kellyanne.
Yes.
Does the president commit to not firing Robert Mueller?
The president has not even discussed that. The president is not discussing firing Bob Mueller.
But will he commit not to fire him?
We are complying and cooperating with. He has not even discussed not fire. He's not discussed firing Bob Mueller.
That's not what I'm asking.
And in fact, Ty Cobb. Well, hold on. I'm not the president's lawyer here, but I will tell you as his counselor, he is not discussing that. You have to listen to his special counsel, Ty Cobb, who works in the White House now, and has said very clearly, George, this week, that we will continue to cooperate with Bob Mueller in his investigation, even though he just hired the 16th person. Many of them are Democratic donors. But we'll continue to cooperate and comply. And Ty Cobb said something that reflects the thinking of all of us, including the president. Anything that gets us steps further to this conclusion of what the president has called a complete false and fabricated lie, a conclusion in search of evidence, anything that brings us closer to that conclusion, we're all for. But so far, you've got conclusion and no collusion. And anybody who denies that is lying. We were promised Watergate. We were promised direct evidence of interfering and changing the electoral results. People talk about the 70,000 votes in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. There's none of that. Nobody even talks about that. What about Adam Schiff and Mark Warner, the two Democrats who are in charge of the intelligence committees? They spend more time on TV than they do interviewing witnesses. What is this investigation really about? It's about an excuse for the Democrats who have no vision. Even Democrats don't want to be Democrats anymore. The Democratic governor of West Virginia became a Republican this week because his party is so out of touch with everyday Americans. He can't look at the coal miners in his state, the working people, those who suffered with no health care, who were lied to by the last president about keeping their doctor and keeping their plan. He became a Republican because he believes in free markets and democracy.
Kellyanne, no one can take away the president's popularity in West Virginia. We'll see what happens with the Mueller investigation. One final subject, this transgender ban that the president put out, the transgender tweet a couple of weeks ago on July 26. He said, after consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Yet after he sent out that tweet, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said he's going to wait for any official order from the president before they implement it. You've had the commandant of the Coast Guard this week saying he's not going to break faith with the transgender individuals inside his forces right now. General Mattis was apparently blindsided by the tweet from the president as well. So what I want to know is specifically which generals and military experts signed off on that tweet from the president.
Well, a number of them, first of all, the tweet didn't make policy, the tweet announced policy. This had been a conversation, discussions had with generals and other stakeholders for a very long time. The president announced it through the forum that he does. It cuts out the middleman. Well, hold on. He had talked to generals for quite a long time. I know that, and other stakeholders. And the fact is, the Pentagon's a big place. If you find 5 or 10 people who say we had no idea, 100 people say we had no idea, that doesn't mean that everybody there who needed to know. I don't know when everybody at the Pentagon found out, but the president has made very clear what his policy is. The next steps, George, as you know, are to have policy guidance and to put the order out and to work with the stakeholders, obviously Secretary Mattis and others, to implement this new policy.
But just did the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, did the defense secretary, did the commandant of the Coast Guard, did the other service chiefs sign off on that policy, on that tweet before the president sent it out?
I can't answer that because I wasn't in the room when they discussed it with him, and I certainly aren't on the National Security Council. But I will tell you, and having spoken with the president directly about this, and having been involved a little bit in the discussions, that the president had consulted for quite a while with different stakeholders, including his generals. What he says in the tweet is absolutely true. He consulted with generals and others about this issue. And, you know, President Obama took a late-in-the-game action. I mean, everybody runs around acting like he had a particular policy for all 8 years. He did not, and you know that. He took late-in-the-game action, and the president is now acting early in his administration because he believes in military readiness and he believes in unit cohesion. This is what he has said. This is what others have said. But the policy guidance and the exact order and the final, the final configuration of the law obviously are forthcoming.
Kellyanne Conway, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, George. Always a pleasure.